Marhaba. Right now we're going to talk about dhuu, which is a word in Arabic that we can use in formal contexts to talk about possession. You probably know a couple of other ways to express possession in Arabic, particles like li or aind that take a pronoun suffix to go along with them. Li akh, I have a brother, or ainduhu kitab, he has a book. Dhuu, however, is distinct in a couple of ways. Number one, we tend to use it to talk about specific kinds of possession. In particular, possession of abstract qualities, like talking about someone having experience or having principles. And the other main situation where we see it is when we're talking about permanent or semi-permanent physical characteristics, like having brown eyes or having black hair, things like that. It is very formal. We're unlikely to hear it in normal vernacular speech. It's unlikely to be overheard in a conversation, but it is used in formal contexts, so we need to be prepared to grapple with it. Dhuu is one of the so-called 5 names, al-asma al-khamsa in Arabic, that take distinct long vowel endings when they are part of an idafa. The difference with dhuu, and we have another video on al-asma al-khamsa that you can go look at if you'd like a refresher on how they work typically, but dhuu is sort of distinctive in that, number one, we're only ever going to see it as the first part of an idafa because it kind of means having or possessing, having brown hair, having blue eyes, having great experience. And it has separate forms in masculine and feminine, dual, and plural. This chart may look a little bit intimidating, but a lot of the grammar that you already know is applicable in this case. If you see these columns here, we have separate variants of dhuu for marfu'a, mansub, and majroor cases. Now, if you look at the waw, alif, and ya here, you'll notice that they correspond to the short vowel markings that we could expect on the end of a singular noun. If a singular noun were in marfu'a, we would expect to see 1 or 2 dhammas at the end. If it were in mansub, we would expect to see 1 or 2 fathas. And if it were in majroor, we would expect to see 1 or 2 kasras at the end. So the waw is the long vowel sound that corresponds to dhamma. The alif is the long vowel sound that corresponds to kasra, short a sound. And the ya corresponds to the short I, kasra sound. Same thing here in the feminine versions. We have a dhamma, a fatha, and a kasra. So it's much like the grammar that you already know if you have spent some time learning about i'rab, Arabic case endings. So too, when we look at the dual and plural forms, it may seem a little bit arbitrary, but remember that dhuu in any of these versions is always the first word of an idafa. So take the masculine dual version, it's a bit like we tacked on that an ending that we know from dual, but we would remove the noon if any word were part of an idafa. Or the male plural version, it's almost as though we tacked on the un and then removed the noon because of its place at the beginning of an idafa. Like if we were talking about the employees of the company in formal Arabic, that idafa would look like this: muwadhafu al-sharika. Because in an idafa, that noon that would ordinarily be there has to disappear. It's just a rule of formal Arabic. And we have a separate video on that process as well, if you'd like a refresher. Let's take a look at some examples. If we wanted to say, for example, in formal Arabic, do you know the student with long hair? Let's make her a woman. Do you know the female student with long hair? هل تعرف الطالبة? Now, since طالبة is the object of تعرف, it's going to take a mansoob case ending. It's going to take a fatha. So I know that taliba is mansub, and therefore, so the student having the long hair, I need to go to the feminine mansub version of this word, and I wind up with ذات. الشعر الطويل. Remember again, ذات is technically the first word of an idafa, so the noun and the adjective describing the noun that follow are going to be majroor because they are non-first words of an idafa. So we would add a kasra onto those words in a fully vocalized sentence. Another example, we need employees who have experience. We could say in Arabic, نحتاج إلى موظفين. Now موظفين is majroor with ya nun, not waw nun, because it comes after a preposition, a harf jar, illa. And that means that I'm talking about multiple employees in the majroor, so I need the masculine plural majroor version of dhuu, which is dhawi. Dhawi khibra. And since this is technically an idafa, an indefinite idafa, I would also need to include a kasra on the second word, but it would take tanween. Khibratin. Another example. In our house, there are 2 cats with green eyes. 2 cats that have green eyes. So, in this case, I might, in formal Arabic, use a fronted predicate, put that prepositional phrase first. في بيتنا. قطتان. Now this is the mubtada, the subject of a jumla ismiya, so it's going to be marfu'a, which means I'm going to need to use the marfu'a version, and it's going to need to be in the dual. So, feminine, because qitta in the singular is feminine. Notice here I have 2 variations, since dhuu is a very formal word and people are likely to pull it out as a way of kind of showing off their eloquence in Arabic. They might go for one or the other. They might pick the one that seems more obscure just to show off a little bit. So we'll go with version number 1, dhata, but we could go with dhawata. Dhata عيون خضراء. One last thing that you should know about dhuu is that in the plural, in al-jam' al-mudhakkar, sometimes this is used as a synonym for ahl, family, or more specifically, parents. So if we wanted to say, she lives far from her family, in a very formal register of Arabic, we could say taskun, or hiya taskun, if we really wanted to include that pronoun. بعيدا عن, and now that would be far from. Since an is a harf jar, I need to use the majroor version. Far from her family, dhawi, and then I would add the possessive suffix ha at the very end. An. ذويها. هي تسكن بعيدا عن ذويها. She lives far from her parents. Once again, Dhuu is a very formal structure. You may not need to use it ever at all in your own writings, or you could put it there just to demonstrate to the world how very thorough your knowledge of Arabic structures is. However, you are likely to encounter it in contexts where someone is writing for eloquence, and it is part of what makes us able to demonstrate our knowledge of the fine points of Arabic grammar if we use it ourselves.